it would feel like we'd be selling ourselves a bit short if we were to sell today and not have realized the full potential of what we've built so far, which is kind of like that's really what we're focused on now is the typical, because I do feel a little bit of that itch, and it's typically the itch is stronger when, we had a bad week, or like you just get, you regress a little bit in dealing with the same issues, or you get sucked back into putting out fire.
Welcome back to Inspired or Acquired. This is a podcast where we interview real business owners, talk real numbers, and give them a valuation and ask them whether or not they would sell or hold on to their business. So today we're joined by Alex Forbes out of Cleveland, Ohio. He runs an awesome custom cabinetry business that you're going to hear all about. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Clint Fiore. So Alex, how are you, man?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on, guys. Excited to dive into this.
Yeah, it should be a fun one. So tell us a little bit about your business, 30 seconds or a minute in terms of what you do and who your customers are. And then we'll have Clint dive into the numbers.
Sure. Yeah. So I founded Lane17 Cabinet Company. We design, engineer, manufacture custom cabinetry. We have primarily a local presence here in Cleveland, Ohio, but we actually ship all over the country. We have two different customers, primarily say 60% probably trade partners, interior designers, builders, people that are in the trades. And then we also sell direct to homeowners as well. And so we have a couple different workflows for that, but ultimately we're focused on quality. We really get into the nitty gritty of customization, storage, finishes. We're definitely not just a run of the mill cabinet shop. So we focus on tailoring the whole package to what somebody wants out of storage, aesthetics, the whole thing.
Very cool, man. Well, I want to jump right in as just put on my business broker hat, put on my valuation hat, and just see if I can tempt you to sell this baby. Okay. So we talked a little bit before the show, and you've been doing this 8 years, correct?
Yep. 8 years.
And it sounded like you have a partner. Can you tell me what does your split look like on the ownership here?
Yeah. So my partner, Jason, he has 20%. I have 80%. We partnered up 5-6 years ago, kind of out of necessity. We both had separate businesses. We needed employees. We couldn't afford them. I gave him basically 20% sweat equity, and the rest is history. We've kind of grown it from there.
Awesome. Well, I've enjoyed following you on Twitter. I love the work you do. You do beautiful looking stuff. So just hats off to you. And you started this thing just from scratch, right? Like you're making cutting boards and then got into cabinets and everything else.
I've had small business in my blood since, both sides of my family, grandparents, nobody had a regular W-2 job. So I never really saw that. Got my first taste of the real world after college, corporate job, didn't like it. I was a commercial real estate brokerage. So it's just the grind of cold calling and all that. And I love sales, but I didn't like that kind of sales. I think I was, I'm very stubborn. So I dove into woodworking, and I started out of a one-car garage 8 years ago.
Yeah. Do you have any debt on the business?
We do. It's primarily equipment debt. So I'm looking out into the shop right now. We have about $250 in equipment, and then I have another $120 in line of credit. So almost $500. It's a little debt heavy.
Well, this might make your decision pretty easy. So I'm going to rattle off. You told me some of your numbers, so just tell me if this sounds right. You've been in business 8 years. You've got 9 employees. You're doing about 1.2 million in revenue. You've got about a 450,000 gross profit, and then you've got, I would say, roughly 250 to 300 in discretionary earnings. That would be adding together what you and your partners pay yourselves and pay perks and benefits, plus the net profit left over on your profit and loss statement. So I almost think I would probably land at about 250 based on the conversation in terms of earnings power on a discretionary basis, the way you sit today and run your company today. So you've developed a nice company. It's a tough industry. It's very competitive. It's who you know, and it's a skilled labor thing, and it can be up and down based on the construction demands and all that. So it's a very commendable thing that you've built this up to, over $1 million in revenue. That's less than 10% of businesses ever get there. So hats off to you for getting there, and you're making a good living and making beautiful stuff. So you got a good thing going. But when I just put on my broker hat, if you came to me and said, Clint, I'm tired, I want to sell. The good news, bad news is I would say you probably have a sellable company. Custom cabinets don't sell, especially at this size. They don't sell for very high multiples. It's not as big of a buyer pool out there for them, and people are a little afraid of anything tied to construction right now. And I did some research on comps, and I feel like you would probably end up with a sale between $500,000 to $700,000 if you just said, hey, I'm going to do a 30-day transition. You're buying me out. I'm going to sell off into the sunset. The bad news is you have pretty close to that in debt, right?
Right. There's not much of a sunset with that, is there?
Yeah. So to me, I feel like you could get out of this business if you wanted to, but you couldn't really get out with a big bag of cash right now.
Sure.
So it would almost just be like, the good news is it's worth probably more than the debt that you have on it. But the bad news is it's not much more at this point. So it's almost like, you're 8 years into this thing. In the brokerage world, we have a phenomenon that we call the 7-year itch. And it's just like, there's some people that after about 7 years of doing something, they just want to do something else. Right. And I think the main reason you might want to sell, if you were persuaded to sell, would just be like, there's something else that's calling your name that you think that would be a better, more lucrative opportunity, more passionate opportunity for you, or something like that. So with all that said, how does that sit with you? Does that catch you off guard, surprise you? What's your reaction to that? And what are your feelings when you think about, the timing of an exit and where you're at today?
So it's completely in line with, I'm not a broker. I've never really tried to go out and value companies. So, but it is in line with what my feelings are, because, ultimately all that debt, that's been nearly 8 years of decision making to finance more equipment to continue to expand. And I knew by doing that, it would make selling at our current size pretty unappealing. And so, and it's also been a commitment to continue growing this thing. And it's in line because they realize, we'll probably finish somewhere between 1.5 and 2 this year. So there's good growth. But we're noticing that with the equipment, the debt, the overhead that comes with that, we kind of need to reach this 3 to 5 million plateau to extract the capacity out of the equipment we've purchased. And I'm sure we'll get into what could it be worth in the future, but it's completely in line with where we're at now, where I always figured if I were to sell today, it would basically just be a sum of the assets kind of sale.
Yeah. You'd be lucky to squeak out a little bit of goodwill value, especially if you had a flowing pipeline of projects that would transfer to a new owner, and a lot of good relationships with repeat, clients. Like if you got home builders that you're their go-to, and or various, repeat clients, like that can create a little bit of that goodwill value on top of the assets. But I just think where you're at size-wise right now, there's and how much, nice new equipment that you bought, there's not a lot of overhang of goodwill over that equipment value.
Right. It would feel like we'd be selling ourselves a bit short if we were to sell today and not have realized the full potential of what we've built so far, which is kind of like that's really what we're focused on now, is the typical, because I do feel a little bit of that itch, and it's typically the itch is stronger when we had a bad week, or you just get you regress a little bit in dealing with the same issues, or you get sucked back into putting out fires. So
or you get that itch when you log into Twitter and see that everyone's multimillionaire.
There's 1,000 other things that can make way more money with way less effort. Yeah.
I mean, to give you some credit though, going from 1.2 to, 1.5 or 2 million, wherever you end up this year, that's a pretty sizable jump. Where's that coming from? Do you have a lot of momentum with the B2B market, or are you finding more success selling to homeowners, or it's a pretty awesome jump?
We actually switched to cabinetry about 4 years into it. We used to do custom furniture. That's a whole nother conversation. Custom cabinetry is tough custom furniture is like, that should just stay more or less a hobby or in like a one-man shop environment. It's very difficult. So it's another reason why I wouldn't sell today, because I feel like we've more or less are just getting started with cabinetry. We've just made it through the learning curve of how to really manufacture custom cabinetry. And now we're trying to systemize it, standardize a lot of internal processes. But I didn't have a ton of experience around cabinetry 4 years ago, but I always felt that if we can get into the higher tier of the market, custom cabinetry, higher ticket per customer, more rooms in the house than maybe just the kitchen. We've done a lot of full house packages, that we're almost a little insulated from macroeconomic swings, because we're really catering to the very high end of wealth or like income of the population. So even though there's kind of this a macroeconomic pullback the last year or so, we've doubled the business in the last 24 months. I mean, it's just, we're getting, the demand is so strong, and it's actually come from trade professionals that are out of state. We've increased our out of state presence a lot more than maybe 24 months ago.
Wow.
So we've partnered with a couple designers, one that's turning into repeat business in upstate New York. We're doing our second full house out in San Francisco. And then we still have a local presence too. So it's been cool to actually see it play out, but it's kind of what we guessed by going with the higher end of the market customer.
That's awesome. Hey guys, wanted to take a quick break from the show just to tell you about our companies for a second. I'm Patrick Dichter and I own Appletree Business Services. We do quality accounting and tax nationwide. So if you're running a business or looking to buy a business, we'd love to help you out with accounting and tax services. You can find us at appletreebusiness.com. And Clint, tell us about Bison Business.
Yeah, Bison Business is my firm. We do nationwide M&A. So we help people buy and sell companies. Most of our customers have companies in the 1 to 20 million revenue range, profitable businesses. So if you've got one and you're ready to get acquired, you can reach out to us at bisonbusiness.com for a complimentary evaluation. We can get you to market and get you sold. If you're a listener that's a buyer that wants to buy a company that size, make sure you're on our email list, because we'll send you out deals first before they hit the market anywhere else. But we'd love to serve you anytime you're thinking of acquiring or selling your business. We want to be your first stop at Bison Business.
Awesome. Now back to the show. In a former life, I had a consulting client that did high-end custom cabinetry in Denver. And I'll never forget one of their projects. They had a house in Vail, and the bunk beds alone that they helped with were like 40 G's. This is probably the second or third house. And those are the bunk beds, not the kitchen. So
it's tough because you get to that tier where money is of no object, and then the level of service has to be completely off the charts, and that's a hard thing to execute as well.
Are you guys doing install too, or you just manufacture and then ship it?
We offer an install service, but we're also fine. Definitely not out of state. That's only for local business. But if locally or definitely out of state, we would just pass it off to the contractor and they would manage install if we don't have a presence there.
Got it.
So a lot of coordination, but it's worked out.
Mm-hmm. Clint, I don't know, you might have been going this way, but it sounds like you've got some really good momentum right now. And you say 8 years, but it really sounds like 4 years in the cabinetry game, which is impressive to grow like this. So, what's the vision? Like, where do you want to take this business in the next, 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I wanted to see kind of where you think you can get to in the next 3 to 5 years, Alex, and what's going to be the primary drivers.
I definitely, our targets are set on that 3 to 5 million. We're kind of running the numbers. We're considering to get there, we'll definitely need a new space. We're in 7,500 square feet now. 1,500 square feet of its office. So the shop really works like a 6,000 square foot space. We're totally maxed out to the brim on equipment. We could fit a few more people, but so a move, which is so expensive to move every time we relocate this equipment. So it'll be a new space, 3 to 5 million. We'll see if it makes sense to scale past 5 million. I think everybody likes to shoot for the 10 million because that's a nice round number. You cross the 8-figure line, and but I'm unsure if it'll make sense with the level of and quality of service that we provide, how much that's going to be able to scale with us without us changing really the business model and going to maybe a more standardized route which I don't necessarily want to do because then you blend in with all the mass producers and we no longer differentiate at that point. So to answer your question, I say 5 million is the goal. I do think we can hit that in 5 years, but it's definitely going to take a lot of consistent growth.
Got it.
So if you came back on this show and it's 3 or 5 years in the future, and let's say your numbers look like this, so 4 million of revenue, and you've kept your margins somewhat similar to what they are now. And so let's say maybe there's like, I don't know, 800,000 of discretionary earnings. And I come back and I say, yeah, you're going to get north of 2 million, like probably 2.5 for this business. And I ask you about debt, and your debt's been paid down quite a bit. So maybe you have like 100K of debt or less, something like that instead of 500. So now, even with the split to your partner, you'd be able to get, over $1 million. And that's something you could make a pivot with, like it's not, none of us are talking like we're retiring here, we're sailing off to the sunset, but that's a chunk of change. If you wanted to pivot and do something else in life, you could have some real runway there. Like, do you think that would tempt you at that point? Or do you feel like you're in this for the super long haul, or like, how do you feel about your industry and your business as far as like, is it a means to an end to get you to somewhere else? Or do you feel like you've got some master plan that involves, custom cabinetry and taking this thing all the way for much longer?
I have, sometimes it depends on the day, because I do have this vision, so I mean, I'm young, I'm only 31. So like at 5 years, I'd only be 36. To have $1 million cash at 36 to go take, I feel like, because of how, I didn't know this at the time, right? Ignorance is bliss. But once I got on Twitter and started learning about other types of businesses and industries, I realized how difficult custom cabinetry is to scale. And because of that, I feel like I got, let's say in 5 years, I've been doing this 12, 13 years total. I feel like I would have gotten a 25-year education on entrepreneurship and small business. So I would definitely consider taking the $1 million and running into something else with the kind of experience I'll have at that point. And then sometimes though, my wife and I just started having kids. I do think, well, what if my kids want to get into the business, or it's something to pass down? It's kind of the legacy. But that's going to be 25 years from now. I mean, I'd really have to commit to see that through. So I think, I'd probably be leaning like 60-40, 60, in favor of selling and going on to go either build something else, buy something else. Definitely want to get into real estate, with even starting with buying our own next shop. So I think I'd swing over in the sell direction, I think, at that point.
Okay. Well, keep our numbers handy.
Yeah, right.
I think that's realistic, to just say, yeah, like, and that's what I love about kind of our generation. I think you're a millennial, right? Like me and Patrick, I think are old millennials, and you're like
senior millennials.
Yeah, we're the elderly millennials. But I do think, that's something to emphasize to the listeners, is when you listen to Alex talk. I mean, he's done this for 8 years. He knows this space. He clearly has passion for this space, but unlike a lot of our parents and grandparents who they really identify, like, I am a cabinet maker. Like right. Alex, when I talk to him, I hear this, like, I run a cabinet making business, but it's not necessarily my life's calling necessarily, and I could see myself doing other things. And that's more the millennial attitude, I think, towards business ownership, is we view our businesses as an asset we own. We care about them. They are, like, part of our lives and our kids, but they're not necessarily as personally wrapped around us. And so yeah, this is a good advice for buyers. We have a lot of buyers listening to this, is don't just assume, because a lot of buyers, they think if the seller isn't 70 years old, there's something wrong with it. Like that's like a universal objection. Right. And I sell lots of businesses for people in their 30s, 40s, and 50s that just are like, you know what? I've had a good run. I think this is about as big as I can get it. And without just totally reinventing myself or taking on lots of risk. And I think it's in a good place, and someone could take it and and continue it from here, but I think I want to go do something else. And like, there's literally nothing wrong with that. And it's more of a generational thing. And so, yeah, there is kind of like this common misconception where, the boomer generation, maybe that was true. Like if somebody, cause a lot of boomers equate selling their business to retiring. I'm done. I'm never wanting to work again. So now it's time to sell my business. But Xers and millennials, like when we're done, it's just because we feel like doing something else, and
right.
And we may feel like there's another, better opportunity for us, and we're more, even in the workforce, we're more career jumpers, and in the entrepreneurial space, we can jump businesses.
Yeah, I think so. Like the name Lane17 comes from like some family roots, and like it's a real place up in Maine. It's very near and dear to my heart. But the desire to start a business in woodworking or cabinetry when I was, 24 or however old, 23, was more because I grew up exposed to small business owners. It was in my blood. It's what I wanted to do, but I had no life experience and I didn't know exactly where to apply that energy. But woodworking and carpentry, just building things with my hands, was always something I did as a hobby, and it was more or less a passion, still is. And I applied it to just kind of that passion to kind of make what I like doing also my business, which, I haven't worked in the shop now for 5 or 6 years, so I don't do any woodworking anymore, but unless it's a personal project. But I think it's aligned with that because now it's, let's just say I hit year 13, 14, 15 doing this. I'm just going to want to apply the new energy I have towards business to something else. And I think what you said is completely fair. I do have a question about, or what you think maybe on multiples, maybe in 5 years, and maybe talk out a theory with me. I think, talking about boomers and just people aging and all that, so many of the trades, cabinetry is an interesting thing because we're a hybrid of a manufacturing facility. We're a carpentry trade and like more or less fine woodworking, depending on what part of our process you're talking about. And so we kind of get lumped in with manufacturers, but also with home services and the trades. And with such an aging trade population, do you see, I think demand will continue to rise as more and more skilled tradespeople retire. Do you envision multiples changing at all at 5 or even 7 years from now for a business like mine, or even home services in general?
I mean, that's tough. In general, like I've looked back on the history of M&A and Main Street business brokerage all the way to the earliest data, which is really like the 1960s. So we only have about 60 years and change of multiple data available, because that's when people started caring about it and tracking it. And what I found is it's an extremely off across all those decades. And you had, recessions and boom times, up and downs. The multiples of Main Street businesses have stayed remarkably similar, even through all the different interest rates and economic factors, without changing that much. And I almost think, because we have, 60 years of history to say they don't really change outside that band much. Once you're in the middle market, you have kind of some boom and bust cycles, which I would call that I would say, above $10 million deal sizes that are more of, they're being bought by public companies or private equity or institutional players. Like there's hot times and cold times in that space, but like the 7-figure, deals like we're talking about, where you're going from that 1 million to the 5 million range, the multiple bands don't change that much through all these different changing circumstances. So I think if I was to give you advice on like exiting well in 5 years and kind of like how to bend the multiple as high as you can and maximize your value, it's almost like, don't count on the macro trends or the timing, because that usually doesn't really move the needle much. I would say your biggest things are going to be being able to prove that you are wearing your owner's hat most days, and that this business isn't reliant on Alex's builder relationships that bring in the work. And you've got levers you can pull to generate leads that aren't just the word of mouth based on your personal relationships and knowledge. So I would say like lead generation systems, so you can reliably prove to a buyer, hey, because that's the biggest concern with these project-based and type businesses is, well, are they just doing it because they like you, or when I buy this thing, am I still going to get opportunities? And if you say, yeah, you just follow the system that we built here that brings in the leads, that gives you a much higher multiple. And so if you've got kind of like systems for when we need new talent, here's how we get new talent. So think of every fear a buyer is going to have. They're going to say, all the skilled tradesmen are retiring. I don't know if I'm going to be able, I don't even know if I can grow this thing because I don't know if I'll be able to hire more people. And you say, oh, no, don't worry. We have a system for that. We have relationships with this trade school. We have this kind of farm system or whatever it is where you bring people up to the junior positions and then to the senior positions. And you have a mentorship program or like stuff like that. So as much as you can assuage the fear of the seller, of the buyer, so put yourself in the shoes of the buyer or the bank and say, like, what are the biggest fears you'd have? Lead generation, talent, these various things, and have a solution for that. And that can get you, that's what could get you moved from like the 2 to a 4x, on a multiple range. Because if it's just, I'm afraid I can't fill your shoes and that these people are going to leave me and I'm not going to be able to replace them, then you're going to get the lowest multiple possible.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And that's exactly, we're at the earlier stages of that effort of systemizing the business and learning what that means, finding out where are all the gaps and how do we remove ourselves from the day-to-day. And I believe, because we've done it, like anybody can muscle their way to $1 million a year brute force. You don't need a ton of systems. You can pull 100-hour weeks. I mean, anybody can get there, but you're not really getting past there. So we're definitely in that phase 2 of going from 1 to 5. And what you said is great advice and it makes a lot of sense.
I think the other thing to be intentional about is commonly with these service businesses, there's like stages, and you can decide which stage you want to be in, right? Like, there's million revenue businesses where the owner does a lot and they might make, 25, 30% margin. And then the next phase is like where you're 3 to 5 million and you have like some leaders and processes in place. But if you get caught in between those two phases, you're just making less money and you're more stressed and you're like, this sucks, So you have to decide which kind of, size company you want to be in, and then, but the next one from 3 to 5 million is probably like an 8 to 10 million push, right? Where you have like a lot of volume and you have multiple layers of your team and things like that. So I think, that'd be the other thing that you could be intentional about and like talk to bigger cabinetry guys that are maybe doing 5 million a year, 10 million a year and decide like which band you want to be in. So that you can be intentional about it and push through. But I think just seeing the way you think about running your business and like seeing some of your posts on Twitter, I have no doubt like you'll have this thing humming at 3 to 5 million.
We're definitely in that gray area of between phases right now where I'm still doing a lot of stuff, stuck in a lot of project level tasks while still trying to build the systems. And it's like, that's where I really believe that's where a lot of people quit, is where when you get stuck in that in between phase, because it takes a lot to push through.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I mean, I can see the board behind you. I remember your post a few months ago when you talked about like the lean methodology and how you tried to gamify that and create it with your team and explain lean to them. And I was like, this is awesome. And I stole it and I took it for our company meeting. And, we had a whole meeting about the tax process and lean methodology. So you put out some good content. I can tell that you're really intentional and thoughtful with like the way you grow your business and the way you run it. It's
it's
cool
what's great about like the version of lean that we've learned is that it's really all focused around adding value to the customer, but there's multiple customers, right? There's the obvious, the actual paying customer, the end user of our cabinetry, but to get the cabinetry delivered, there's a bunch of internal customers, right? And that's each other. That could be, if we have only a smaller crew of 4 guys in the shop, they're all responsible for, 3 or 4 different parts of the process. So the customer, they could be a customer of themselves the next day or the next week, downstream in the process. So the lean is all about how to eliminate waste, develop your people, develop your processes. So things become easier. There's less ambiguity, become more standardized. You increase the quality, and it's a great thing. But like most things, you gotta practice at it every day. You can't just like flip the lean switch on and off. It really kind of becomes a lifestyle, more or less. You got to rewire your brain. So I'm glad you found value in that, though, and that you're able to use it.
Yeah, it was awesome. So
yeah, for you and the listeners, like I would recommend probably 2 books. There's one called Built to Sell by John Warlow, and that's a great one if you just start thinking, especially if you're thinking I may get serious about an exit in 3 to 5 years. Like that'll really help you kind of think through how a third party is going to look at your business and how to maximize your value to kind of maximize your exit. And another one would be the Traction book, the EOS system. I'm a big fan of, a big supporter of that. I've used the Traction methodology, the EOS system in my businesses and helped others do it. But yeah, there's a lot of acquirers that are going to plan on installing the entrepreneurial operating system in the businesses that they buy. And it's very popular in our deal size range. And if you already have it running with a strong leadership team in place, it's kind of working on the business and growing the business together, all rowing in the same direction, that can help you get a higher value too, because it just lights up the buyers to know like, oh wow, there's already kind of a good, team and management system in place here, similar to what I'd build. So that saves me a lot of work.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Traction was one of the first books I read a few years ago that were kind of around leadership and business books. And we've like cherry picked a few things that have made sense for us in the moment, but we definitely need to push and like kind of have a nice roundabout system of how to manage everything. So we'll likely be revisiting that.
Very cool. Can anyone that's listening like buy stuff from you, or is it just if they're in Cleveland and need custom work? Or
we do everything a little bit. Yeah, we ship all over the country. So to start, you can reach out to me, DM me on Twitter or our Lane17 Cabinet Co. Instagram as well, or our website, lane17.com. We just need photos of the space. If you have architect plans or even just a rough sketch with dimensions of the kitchen or whatever the space is, I circle back within a day with rough pricing. I explain our design process and how everything works, and we just kind of take it from there. So yeah, we go all over the country though. You don't need to just be around Cleveland.
Awesome. Well, I hope you can be the go-to for custom cabinet work for our listeners and for our audience. We definitely want to plug you there. I've seen your work. It's just beautiful stuff. So really respect what you do there. And any other final items you'd like to plug in just terms of like ways to get a hold of you and interact with you?
No, I think, Twitter is where I'm spending most of my time. Alex Forbes _ is my username. Again, I love discussing with people in the comments, DMs. I could talk shop and talk business all day. So that's where, SMB Twitter has been great for that. And, Clint, I think I may have told you this at one point in time, but you were actually the first person on Twitter that I encountered you were the gateway to the SMB Twitter for me. So I thought you should know that. I think because I don't know if you posted something about Bitcoin or something at the time. I was kind of dabbling in that, and like your post ended up in my feed, and then I saw the people you were following, and that was about a year ago. So the rest is history. So it's been fun.
All right, well, good to know I was the gateway drug for you.
The gateway drug.
Yeah, right.
That's awesome. Well, Patrick, I think I'm ready to mark Alex kind of on the acquired end of the spectrum. We've had a few people on here recently that were more they couldn't see themselves exiting in 3 to 5 years, but I would be surprised if you're willing to even entertain that idea right now. Once you get to these other levels and start reducing that debt and systematizing your business, if it's in the back of your mind, it's going to come to the front of your mind.
Sure.
Probably, within so many years. So, definitely excited to see where the journey takes you. Really proud of you and what you've created. And I'm sure when that time comes, your business will be in good shape, to go to its next owner. But man, super cool of you to let us into the numbers, let us hear how your mind works on it. And we're excited to see where you go from here.
Yeah. I appreciate it, guys. You could count me as inspired to become acquired. How about that?
Yeah, inspired towards acquired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks for having me on, guys. It's been fun.
Bye.